The phone rang just as I was watering the lavender by the window. I almost let it go to voicemail, telemarketers, love calling mid-morning, but something about the number made me answer. Mrs. Elistrin Voss, a clipped voice asked, "This is she. This is Marcus Lindell from Evermont Financial. I'm calling regarding your mortgage account. We've sent several notices, but we've yet to receive a payment in over 3 months." I blinked. Mortgage, yes, ma'am. On the property at 14 Elmsworth Court, Kingston. The balance is $623,000 and change. Your account is currently in pre-foreclosure. I don't own a house in Kingston, I said slowly, as if I might wake up any moment. There must be some mistake. A short silence. Then papers rustled. "Ma'am, the mortgage is under your name, your social security number, and your verified income. The property was closed on in January. Would you like me to resend the documents for review?" "Yes," I said, my voice sharper now. "Send them immediately." He emailed them while we were still on the phone. I opened the PDF. As soon as it landed in my inbox, 30 pages of contracts, approvals, loan applications, all bearing my name. And near the bottom of the packet, under a page, labeled Final Closing Agreement, I saw it, my signature, or at least something almost mine. The capital E curved the way I write it, but the rest was slightly off. Too perfect, too cautious. My hand started to tremble. "This isn't mine," I whispered. "I suggest you visit your bank and possibly the authorities." The voice on the other end said, more measured now. "If this isn't your debt, it's someone's fraud." After I hung up, I sat very still. My tea had gone cold. My lavender plants were still dripping. I thought about my little white cottage paid off 12 years ago, about the quiet life I'd built since Reese passed, about the cautious savings I'd kept, the budgeting I'd done the way I never even considered a second mortgage. And yet someone had done it, using my name, my number, my history, and they hadn't just borrowed a name. They'd taken my future and stamped it with a lie. It was drizzling when I pulled into Elmsworth Court. The houses were newer here, sharp angles, long driveways, the kind of wealth that whispers instead of shouts. I stopped in front of number 14. Even before I turned off the ignition, I knew. The dark gray siding, the glass-paneled front door, the wide porch swing with the navy cushions. I'd seen it before in pictures. Roan had texted me just 3 months ago. "Look what Varela found. Mom, our dream spot. Great schools, close to work. Wait till you see the kitchen." I remembered smiling, politely replying with a thumbs-up emoji. I hadn't asked how they afforded it. I should have. I stayed in the car a while watching the house. Curtains moved in the upstairs window. A child's voice echoed faintly through the rain. I didn't get out. I didn't knock. I backed out slowly and drove 5 blocks over to Evermont Savings and Trust. The woman at the front desk greeted me with the polished courtesy of someone trained to smile through chaos. When I gave my name and the address on the loan, her posture changed. "You're Mrs. Elistrin Voss?" she asked, almost cautiously. "I am. Please wait here one moment." She returned with a man in a gray vest and maroon tie. He introduced himself as Brendan York Mortgage Services Lead. In a small conference room, he laid out the paperwork. My name, my social, my birthday, my income exaggerated, but close. Pages and pages of applications and signatures, all pretending to be me. "Usually we can't show these to someone who isn't the applicant," he said carefully. "But you are the applicant, at least according to our files." He didn't ask if I had taken out the loan. He already knew. I stared at the forms numb. Brendan cleared his throat. Your credit's been impacted significantly, I'm afraid. The account's delinquent. There are notices pending and possible foreclosure proceedings. I nodded, but nothing stuck. It was all a low, thick sound behind my ears, like standing underwater. I left the bank with a folder of copies and a headache blooming behind my eyes. The worst part, I hadn't seen the truth yet. Not all of it. Not close. I used to think Varela just had a bubbly nature. Too many compliments. Too much perfume, always eager to help me carry in groceries or refill my tea. You're so organized, Elestrin, she giggled, poking around my office. Seriously, I wish I had your brain. Once she asked to borrow my W-2. Just for a senior tax discount thing, she said, waving it off. You know, for that drugstore that gives you 15% off if you bring proof of income for someone over 65. Wild, right? I laughed and handed it over. She left my office with it humming. I didn't think twice. Another time a package showed up with my name on it, athletic gear I'd never ordered. Oops, she chirped. I must have used your address by accident when I was logged into your Wi-Fi. I'll return it. Don't worry, she didn't return it. It wasn't that I trusted her. It was that I didn't imagine needing to distrust her. She was married to my son. She called me mom at holidays. She baked lemon squares and brought wine. She played the long game. That night, after the bank visit, I poured myself a cup of tea and logged into my credit report. The screen loaded slowly pages of unfamiliar activity. A luxury car lease for a Galmara X2 SUV. 2 credit cards, both with $20,000 limits, both maxed. A personal loan for $45,000 opened just 4 months ago. Every account had the same name, mine, but the email addresses were off, not my address. Slight variations, Elistran.Vos93 Elistran V0SSC. Things a stranger wouldn't guess, but a relative might. My hand clenched around the mug, not from fear, from shame. I'd let this happen. I'd let her charm lull me, let her access too much too easily. I had spent my life guarding pennies, and someone had spent my trust like it was loose change in a bowl by the door. I stared at the screen until the cursor blinked me out of my daze. This wasn't about money anymore. It was about identity mine and what it had been worth to the woman who smiled too much. I asked Roan to come over the next evening. Told him I had a few papers I needed help sorting. He showed up with that familiar grin, shoulders loose as if nothing had shifted. I brought out the chamomile tea, still brewed the same way I always did, 2 bags steeped long. I didn't tremble when I passed him the cup. The manila folder lay beside me on the table. When I opened it and began sliding the documents toward him, the change was instant. His smile dropped. His hands froze mid-reach. He stared at the mortgage copy, the forged signature, the loan amounts. Mom, I didn't speak. He kept flipping through the papers slower now. By the time he reached the credit cards and car lease, his face had gone gray. I didn't know it was all that he whispered. Varela handled the applications. She said it was temporary, that we'd pay it off as soon as the commission checks came through. I sipped my tea. Please. He dropped to his knees beside me. Don't go to the police. Please. We were going to fix it. We just needed more time. My hand hovered over the folder, then slowly closed it. You let her use my name. She said we'd refinance in our own names. He said, eyes glistening. She told me you wouldn't even notice that it was just a bridge. A few months, that you'd be proud once it all worked out. Were you going to tell me before foreclosure? His silence stretched, like thread pulled too tight. No. The air between us thickened, filled with all the years I had loved him, raised him, carried him through fevered nights and first heartbreaks. And now he knelt at my feet, begging for silence, not forgiveness. "You've put everything I worked for at risk," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "Everything your father left behind, everything I guarded." He dropped his head into my lap. "I'm sorry, Mom. I didn't touch him. I didn't cry, because the truth had finally arrived, ugly raw, and crouched between us like a thing we both fed." The smell of roast lamb met me before the door opened. I stood there a beat longer than usual, breathing in the scent of garlic and rosemary, the scent of before. Varela opened the door with that same sunshine smile. "Elestrin, you look lovely. Come in, come in. It's warm inside." Warm, yes, and stifling. Roan greeted me with a brief hug. His palm was damp, and when he poured the wine, the bottle rattled against the rim of my glass. The table was set beautifully, as always, seasonal napkins, flickering candles, too many utensils for a weeknight dinner. Varela had made an effort. I almost admired the commitment. Conversation floated around the table like nothing had changed. They spoke about upcoming school districts, Roan's promotion, Varela's book club. Each word sat on the air like a lie with lipstick. I watched them eat. Roan asked about my gardening. Varela complimented my earrings. Her voice never cracked. Her hands never wavered. But I could see the cracks in Roan. He didn't meet my eyes. He laughed too quickly. And when the baby monitor let out a whimper from upstairs, he nearly jumped out of his chair. Varela rose to bring out dessert, a chocolate hazelnut tart. "Just for Mom," she said, beaming. "Your favorite, right?" I nodded politely. My fork rested on the table, untouched. In my purse, beside my knees, was the manila folder. Inside the full police report, the digital evidence, the signature analysis with Marcus's notes. It had weight, not just in paper, but in what it meant, what it could undo. I stared at the tart, beautifully arranged, carefully plated. I couldn't eat a single bite. Roan refilled my wine, though I hadn't touched the first glass. His hand shook again. All I could think was how carefully they were pretending, as if they could erase the theft with meringue and small talk. I smiled once, small and tired. They didn't notice, but the storm had already begun, quietly inside me, and storms I knew could only be held back for so long. When dinner ended and the plates were cleared, I stood. Roan, Varela, stay a moment. Their faces shifted just slightly. Enough. I walked to the sideboard and retrieved my purse, set it gently on the table, unzipped it slowly. The manila folder made a soft slap as I placed it between the salt and pepper shakers. Varela's smile evaporated. Roan closed his eyes. I slid the folder forward, said nothing. For a long time, neither did they. Then Roan whispered, "Mom, don't do this." I looked at him, really looked. His eyes were already red, his voice trembling. "You'll destroy our lives." He added softer this time. I picked up my tea, held it steady. My voice wasn't. "You destroyed mine first." Varela's hands went to her mouth. She began to cry, not the breathless kind, but the careful, practiced sobs of someone who had rehearsed this scene. "I was scared," she said. "We didn't mean for it to go this far. It's just paper, just some numbers. We were going to refinance everything once Brian's bonus came in." My laugh came out sharper than I meant. I set my cup down harder than I should have. "Just paper," I said. "You forged my name, stole my social security number, and bought a house I never stepped foot in. You opened credit lines under emails that mimicked mine. You leased a car, took vacations, ordered wine subscriptions. You built a life I never agreed to pay for. Varela was crying harder now. Roan looked at the ceiling, like answers lived there. Please, he said again, don't go to the police. We'll fix it. We'll make payments. We'll make it right. I stared at my only child, wondering where the boy I raised had gone, wondering if he was ever real. You don't fix this with promises, I said. Not anymore. I stood, picked up the folder, tucked it back into my purse. Varela sobbed into her hands. Roan said nothing. The kitchen was filled with the smell of leftovers and lemon soap and quiet desperation. And I walked out because if I stayed, I might forget who had been wronged. The police station smelled of old coffee and linoleum, neutral things, bland things, nothing like betrayal. But that was what I carried in my purse. Detective Arden Lane met me at the counter. She had firm eyes, clipped speech, but a soft voice. She led me into a windowless room and gestured to a seat. I placed the folder down between us, opened it, and handed her the documents. She flipped through the pages in silence, her brow furrowed at the forged signature comparisons, at the loan approvals, at the credit card statements. Then she looked up. You know what this means, right? She said gently. If the evidence holds, and from what I'm seeing it likely will, this could go to court, possibly prison. I didn't flinch, just reach for the pen. She already sentenced me when she stole my name. I signed. She nodded once. We'll begin the process. You'll be contacted if follow-up is needed. When I stepped outside, the cold air hit me like a wall. I didn't realize how tightly I'd been holding my breath until it escaped in one long stream. Stephanie was waiting at the cafe down the street, a cup of Earl Grey already steeping for me. You did what needed to be done, she said, as I sat still numb. I stared at my tea, its steam curling like questions I didn't want to answer. But why does it feel like I'm the one doing the betraying? I asked. Why does it feel like I cracked something that can't be mended? Stephanie reached over and placed her hand on mine. Because you're decent, she said. Because you still want to believe they'll fix it. But Elistrin, they weren't going to. You were just the easiest person to steal from. I didn't cry. I didn't argue. I sipped the tea. Bitter and a little oversteeped. But it was mine. Later that night, I found myself sitting at the edge of my bed, shoes still on, staring at my filing cabinet. And for the first time, I locked it. The letter came on a Thursday, slipped under my door like any other envelope. White, crisp, harmless, but inside it was not. Notice of foreclosure initiation, it read in heavy black type. The bank was moving forward. My name, my supposed property, accounts I'd never opened frozen now, holding what little safety I had. I felt the blood rush from my fingers as I read the pages again, slower, trying to find a line that said, this was a mistake. There wasn't one. My phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. Roan, Mom, it's happening. Please, don't let them take our house. I stared at the screen until the words blurred, then blocked the number with a single press. An hour later, I met with Detective Lane again. She didn't waste time. We traced the mortgage application to a laptop registered under Varela's name. Same IP, same timestamps as the credit card applications. I nodded. She continued, voice low but certain. We also found some search history, how to declare bankruptcy in someone else's name. Can you go to jail for using your mother's credit? A long silence passed between us. She wasn't desperate, I said finally. She was calculating. That night, I sat alone in the living room, tea cooling on the armrest. I opened the envelope again, rereading the foreclosure details until they etched themselves into memory. The dates, the debt, the lie. Then I stood, walked to the hallway, and pulled down a photo from the wall, Roan and me smiling in front of a pumpkin patch the year after his father passed. I slid it from the frame and tucked it into the fireplace, watched the edges curl. One by one, I took the rest down. Not out of spite, out of necessity. By the time the last frame was empty, I could breathe again. Just barely. But it was the first breath that didn't feel stolen in weeks. Restitution moved like syrup in winter, thick, slow, unwilling. The bank returned limited access after weeks of calls and documents. Some accounts were closed. Some were frozen. Others still lingered like ghosts on my credit report. I'd been told it could take years to fully repair, so I stopped waiting. I took a portion of my retirement fund money I had been saving for some day and used it for a down payment on a modest lakefront home about 90 minutes north. Small, quiet, tucked between trees that didn't ask questions, and most importantly, in my real name. The day I moved in, I arrived alone. The house smelled like cedar and fresh paint. I walked through each room barefoot, my own footsteps echoing back to me. The first thing I installed was a locking mailbox. The second was a fireproof file cabinet. I placed every document inside by hand, labeled each folder with calm precision. Stephanie came the next weekend. We painted the living room a soft sage and laughed over takeout. She didn't ask about Roan. I didn't bring him up. In the evenings, I sat on the back porch with a blanket and my tea, watching the lake change colors with the sky. Sometimes loons called in the distance. Sometimes the silence was its own music. One night, I opened a new journal, clean pages, uncreased spine. On the first page, I wrote, "They borrowed my name, but they never owned who I am." I closed the book gently, like tucking a child into bed. Then I placed it on the shelf beside the tea tin and the old photographs I'd chosen to keep just a few, not because I'd forgotten the others, but because I was no longer living in their shadow. When I turned out the porch light and went inside, I didn't check the locks twice. I knew I was safe, because for the first time in years, I had signed for this life myself. The envelope was lavender, with glittery stars pressed into the corners. I recognized the handwriting, instantly uneven, determined loops. Inside a folded piece of pink paper read, "Dear Grandma, I miss you. Mommy's sad. Daddy's always quiet. Can you come see me? I made you a card. Love, Nara." I read it 3 times before I cried. Not the sharp grief that came with betrayal, but the ache that only children can pull from you. The ache of innocence caught in the crossfire. I didn't call Roan. Instead, I reached out to a lawyer and arranged a structured visit only for the children. No unscheduled drop-ins, no shared meals. Boundaries, the kind that kept me sane. That Saturday, I met Nara and her younger brother in a local library's reading room. I brought a puzzle and a box of lemon cookies. They brought sticky hands and stories about school. "Daddy's quiet a lot," Nara said, picking at the puzzle's corner. "But I told him you still love us. You do right." I smiled through the burn in my throat. "Of course I do, always." Roan arrived to pick them up. He nodded but didn't speak. I returned the gesture. That was the rhythm now. Mutual silence, careful neutrality. We shared blood, but not peace. Varela never came. Weeks passed, then months. I started volunteering at the local elder literacy program. On Wednesdays, I sat beside Lila, a widow with silver hair and a sharp mind, dulled by betrayal. Her nephew had stolen her retirement. Her story, while different in shape, shared the same bruise underneath. One afternoon, after a session on budgeting apps, we sipped tea on the center's back patio. "I keep asking myself if I was blind," she whispered. "He was just my boy." I touched her hand gently. "Trust is not infinite," I said, "even for family." She nodded, and in her silence, I heard understanding. Later that night, I returned to my porch. The lake shimmered under the moonlight. I wasn't whole, not completely, but I wasn't broken either, just rebuilt, in my name, on my terms, with love that knew where to stop